Hi, everyone, for who's just joining now. I can see people are being added very quickly. We're going to give it just a minute to see how many people are able to make it in, and we'll start momentarily. Let's just give it one more minute. Richard, can you hear me okay? Am I coming through to you?
Loud and clear.
Great.
I'm just scrolling through all the names here.
Perfect. It looks like we got a good crowd.
Hi, everybody.
Well, we can. I'm sure more people will continue joining, but we can go ahead and get started. Thanks everyone for being here to this MCLE Today presentation from the San Diego Defense Lawyers. We're very lucky to have Mr. Richard Hoover here to speak with us today. I'm going to let actually Mark Kaufman from Judicate West introduce him, and we'll turn it over to Mark.
Well, first and foremost, everyone, I hope you and your families are all doing well as we continue through these strange times. I would really also just like to thank SDDL for your support over the past 19 years that we've had an office here in San Diego. We could not have done it without your support, and just want to express our appreciation. Want to introduce Richard Hoover for this presentation, which I'm looking forward to watching myself. Richard, who initially started the practice of law in LA with his uncle back in 1994, excuse me, 88, sorry. And then made his way to San Diego in 94 and has been practicing here was practicing here for 27 years until he became a full-time neutral. Richard has expertise in many different areas, from personal injury to real estate to business cases. Pretty much he's a Swiss Army knife when it comes to mediation, and there's not a case type that I'm uncomfortable recommending him on. Little bit of info on Judicate West. Since the pandemic started, we've done close to 10,000 virtual sessions. When you combine the number of mediations, arbitrations, and discovery hearings we've had, we've also been hosting cases live on an as-needed basis since last June, when we were able to do that. And we look forward to when things get back to normal. But you guys aren't here to see me. You folks aren't here to see me speak. So I'm going to pass the floor to Richard now, and wish you all a good Memorial Day weekend.
Hi, friends. It's nice to see so many familiar names on this list of participants. I wish we were all sitting in a conference room somewhere or in an auditorium so I could actually see your faces. But hopefully during the course of the seminar today, in particular the latter half, that'll happen. My goal is to share with you some of my experiences in the virtual world of mediations, starting in March of 2020. Hard to believe it's been that long. Share some of the observations I have in terms of the practical and technological aspects that I've dealt with over the course of the last 14 or so months. But what I'm really here to do is answer your questions. And our hope is that you will participate in feeding questions either through the chat function so that David can feed them to me, or in a perfect world, I believe we have the ability to have you come up on the screen and ask your question and actually talk like face-to-face on a computer screen. So that's my goal for today, is to have you folks make sure that I'm answering the questions that you have about this not so new world of virtual mediations. So I have about a 30-minute or so PowerPoint presentation to run through. Feel free to pose your questions during the course of the PowerPoint, but then when I'm done, I'm going to get rid of the PowerPoint, and hopefully folks will come on the screen and interact with some questions and answers with me. So without further ado, let's start with the presentation. The past, the present, and the future. The past is very clear. The present is now, and the question really is, what's the future going to look like in the world of mediation? So before we launch into what's happening right now, I just want to reflect a little bit on the good old days. It doesn't seem like it was that long ago, but 14 months ago, this is what I was doing, sitting in a conference room, a meeting with lawyers, mediating cases. People were smiling. There was no such thing as social distancing. Nobody was wearing a mask at all, and we could actually touch hands and shake, which I really missed the human interaction of this profession. And then all of a sudden, the world turned upside down. March 18th, our offices were closed, and we went into everybody wearing masks all over the place. This thing called Zoom, which I had never even heard of before March 18th happened. And now, of course, we're in the world of vaccinations, which means hopefully we're close to getting back to where we used to be. That's my hope. So what's the future look like? That's the question everybody's asking. I think this probably reflects what the future looks like. There will be in-person mediations going on. There will be hybrid mediations going on, and then there might be all virtual mediations going on. So let's talk a little bit about what I see over the past 14 months as some of the pros of doing virtual mediations, because there are definitely pros of doing so. Back when things were really bad and the coronavirus was raging and people were getting sick, there's no concern about getting ill when you're sitting in front of your computer screen. So everybody felt very comfortable with it. Most people were separated. It wasn't even a period of time when lawyers and their clients were even in the same offices. So people were in different locations, and yet we were all able to be together on this computer screen by the virtue of technology, something that would not have been available had this happened early in my legal career. Back in the 80s, none of this would have been possible. So from that standpoint, thank goodness for technology and allowing all of us to be able to work remotely. The technology itself, even though I had never heard of it before March 18th of 2020, it actually is pretty easy to use. And once you become familiar with it, there are more things that you can do on Zoom mediation than you normally do. Functions and features that are available that most people don't even know about and don't use. But from my standpoint as the mediator, it allows me unfettered access to the folks that I want to talk to. I have found it easy to use. I've learned what I need to learn, and hopefully you folks have as well. The Zoom platform itself has evolved over time. If you might recall, way back in the very beginning, there were some security issues. Some people were breaching Zoom meetings. The company has invested a ton of money to make this technology what it is today. There were others out there that we had looked at Judicate, and I know that they're still available generally speaking, but I think overwhelmingly the majority of mediations are being done on Zoom, and this is the only platform that I've used. I think the court uses Microsoft something for their hearings. I have not tried that, but I think this particular technology is perfect for what we need. And then let's face it, has it been a downer that you don't have to drive all over the place? The answer is no. For me in particular, I actually bought a new car last March. I put 9,000 miles on my car in the course of 1 year. I don't remember a point in my lifetime where I drove 9,000 miles in a year. So the travel aspect of Zoom mediations is great. When you're done, particularly if you're doing it at home, you're already home. So that aspect of it has definitely been a plus. I haven't heard too many people that are anxious to start driving all over the place again, but it's my hope that we will get back to in-person. People will put in the time to drive, and we'll be back shaking hands again. In some aspects, there was a question about, was this platform going to make it easier for people to check out? Was there going to be less participation? And in my experience, I think it's raised the level of participation, particularly in your world and with the insurance adjusters, those that are not in California, those that would have to have flown in. A lot of times they didn't fly in and they were on the phone with you, but yet they participate now on the Zoom call. And I can see them and talk to them. So from that aspect, I think it's raised the level of participation for mediation. Companies now can have 3 or 4 people show up at a mediation without worrying about having to fly them in or drive in. They can all be there. They can be in and out if they need to be doing other things. And then they can come back onto the Zoom session when we need them. So from that aspect, I think Zoom has increased the level of participation in certain aspects of the mediation world. So those are a lot of the pros. Hard to argue against any of them. Are there some drawbacks from virtual mediations? Well, the answer for me is yes. And the first one is, how do you develop rapport with somebody who's brand new, that you've never met, that's in a room at their offices with their client somewhere, but they're sitting on a computer screen? You see about as much of them as you do of me, right, from the shoulders up, and you're talking on a virtual screen with them, as opposed to walking in, looking them in the eye, shaking their hands and saying, "Good morning, I'm Richard, nice to meet you." So that aspect of it has taken a little bit of time for me to get used to, frankly. I'm still not 100% used to it. And I spend far too much time looking at a computer screen. So that aspect really, I don't think has changed for me. It's become more comfortable in the sense that I've done it for so long now, it's routine. And maybe it'll be weird when people show up in person and I actually have to walk in again. And I guess we probably won't shake hands for a little while, fist pump. But that aspect of it was challenging, I think. It's also hard to read people. You know, are they really dialed in? Are they participating? What's going on with them? Because mediation is a full contact sport for me. It's not just talking and reading. There are emotions in the room. There are personalities in the room, and there are things that you can pick up on in person that's more difficult to pick up online. So for those two aspects, those for me have definitely been cons. I think other people are thrilled not to have to be in person. They're happy to be sitting at home because they can literally go do something else when they're done talking to me and then come back and talk to me. So I think it's pros and cons for certain people. For me, I miss seeing people. And then as I alluded to earlier, the question was, if people are going to be there virtually, are they going to be as dialed into the process? Are they going to be as invested in it? Do they have enough skin in the game if they know they can be watching, literally watching TV during a mediation and I wouldn't necessarily know it? I would say over the last 14 months or so, I can count on one hand the number of times where I felt somebody really was checked out. Otherwise, I think the ability to be here and then be somewhere else and then be here in the comfort of your home or your office has increased the level of participation and buy-in from my experience. And again, allowing people to participate as they need to and then check out and check back in. Again, I think overall, this process has allowed for more buy-in. I know I had questions at the very beginning, as did many of my colleagues, whether this was going to be a drawback or not. One hand, and really I can only think of two right now, of instances where it was very clear to me the person had completely checked out. So that's the kind of the pros and the cons of in-person versus virtual. Again, I'm anxious when it's safe and it feels like it's right around the corner to get back and see people in person. Hopefully you'll feel comfortable too, particularly for all of my San Diego friends who are right here and the travel is very limited. So that's kind of a weighing of the benefits versus the drawbacks. Let me talk about some of the technical issues, because realistically, even though this is going to sound boring and dry, this really is where I've run into issues in cases. There's only so much internet strength out there. And for people who are doing this on Wi-Fi, there have been times where we've had significant delays because people have frozen up. You can't hear them, they cannot hear you. Bandwidth issues, even if you're at home and your Wi-Fi is great, but you've got your kids at home and they're doing online schooling and your spouse is at home and they're doing work, it does impact the quality of the connection. And it makes it challenging sometimes, frankly, to make progress. I've had cases where people have dropped off repeatedly and then they have to come back in and rejoin. So these are issues that are important. I'm plugged into the Ethernet cable here at Judicate. I've been coming in here since August of 2020, and I've done every virtual mediation here since then, other than when I had to self-quarantine at home for a period of time. So I found that the Wi-Fi is not the way to go. If you're plugged in with an Ethernet cable, you're safe. But these are issues, particularly if you're dealing with a client who's not a professional, not an adjuster, and it's a new experience for them. You'll definitely want to run through the issues because it does impact the process and it impacts the quality. Audio and video, there are some people that they can't hear me and I don't know why. They have video issues. Some people don't want to be on camera, but these are things that you definitely want to think about in advance to make sure that this is all covered for your clients. And again, if your clients are professional business people, insurance adjusters, et cetera, they've been there and they've done that. But if you have individuals that have not done very many Zoom mediations, you'll definitely want to cover that with them so that there's no issues with my ability to see and hear them and their ability to see and hear me. For whatever reason, Macs, and particularly with the audio feeds, just don't work as well with Zoom. And I've seen more people struggle to get their audio working with their Macs than with a PC. And some people have actually called in on their cell phone for the audio portion and used the Mac for the video portion. I don't know why. And then of course, there's the client who's on the cell phone and they're walking around while they're talking to you, and I'm getting motion sick and it's hard to see and hear them. But again, you want to make sure that you and your clients, your representatives have the technology and the computers that they need to make sure this works. I'm assuming by now, people have done this enough times that they've worked out all those issues. Backup is critical. My number one backup is my cell phone. I text everybody before mediation starts to make sure they have my cell phone number. If anything happens, they send me a text. Hopefully I see it or hear it, but you'll want to have a backup. I have experienced, I think, everything that you can experience that can go wrong, from batteries dying to internet going out to power outages. Somebody knocked a cup of coffee on their keyboard and they had no computer. So you want to definitely have a backup plan for anything that could happen. And, you know, in my experience, the cell phone is the best way because we can text, we can email, and we can talk. Backgrounds. This has been a point of some seminars. I think they have blogs on this thing. There have been studies about what kind of backgrounds people should have on a Zoom meeting so that they display the correct amount of seriousness or intellectualness. Or there's plants, there's books, and there's flowers apparently are the top three things to have behind you. So I dragged two plants behind me here at the Judicate offices. One is real and one is fake. Maybe you should tell me at the end which one you think is real or fake, but the background is important, particularly if it's going to be distracting. So you'll want to make sure that your clients have the appropriate background. I have had a few instances where the lawyers have been in their offices and they have their computer screen situated so that it's kind of angled towards a window and the sun comes in and I can't see anything except a bright aura of light. Things to think about. I can tell you there have been experiences with people who do virtual backgrounds that they think look cool, but then they kind of blend in, or they fade in, or they fade out. It's distracting. I used a green screen at home when I did this originally up till August, a huge 8-foot by 10-foot green screen. And I did project a fake background behind me because my home office in the bedroom just was not conducive to seeing what was behind me. Lately, I've seen people that have some sort of blur feature where all I see is them and then everything behind them is blurred. But it is important to make sure that there's nothing in the background that's going to be distracting. And if you do use a virtual background, use one that actually works so you don't fade in and out. All right, practical issues in mediation. Unlike the old days when you'd all be sitting in a conference room and the question was, which conference room were they in? It's number 12. Okay, go to number 12. These are issues that need to be worked out in advance, particularly if you're going to have somebody who's not with you. So figure out where they're going to be and make sure that you've covered the technical issues with them. I've had as many as 23 participants in a mediation. I think every one of them was in a different location. Why is that important? Well, how are you going to communicate with somebody who's not sitting with you if you need to communicate with them? Things of that nature. So practical issues to consider is the location of where everybody's going to be. If there are any issues and they haven't done it before, definitely practice with them, have them log in just so they feel comfortable with it. I've had a lot of cases where the adjuster is on a microphone only, there's no camera for them, but yet they can see me, they can see everybody else. I think that's evolving and changing, and I think most companies now are allowing their adjusters to get on camera, or they've changed their equipment out so that they can support the bandwidth that's needed to have video. But if somebody's only going to be on audio, I'd like to know that in advance just so I can be prepared for it. Virtual downtime. You know, one of the benefits perhaps of virtual mediation is, unlike the old days when you're trapped in a conference room with your client, and I left the room, you two or three or however many people were in the room had to find something to talk about or do while I was gone. That works for the first hour, the second hour, but by the time you get to the 5th, 6th, and 7th hour, there's not much new stuff to talk about while I'm gone. I have found the beauty of this process is that people just mute their microphones, they kill their cameras, they're doing other work, working on other files, doing whatever else people are doing when I'm not there. And then when I come back in, they all come back and appear. So maybe I should have put that as one of the pros, that you don't necessarily have to entertain a client for the entirety of a mediation virtually if you don't want to. Is anything different about virtual mediations versus the old mediations of in-person? Well, not for me. It has increased the importance of pre-mediation phone calls, or at least pre-mediation emails, so I can figure out some of these practical and technical issues in advance. So I encourage you, if I haven't reached out to you, or if your mediator hasn't reached out to you and there are things you want to talk about, still do that, because it's a valuable tool to use. The more information I have about issues that are going to be a challenge for the day, whether they be substantive or technical, the easier it makes the process for the day. So I still do the same thing I was doing before, and perhaps a little bit more so now. How do you conduct the mediation, Richard? Well, back in the beginning of this pandemic, I was given separate links for every party, and the party was given their own link. And so I would move back and forth between links on my computer. A few months ago, I changed over to the breakout room method. What that means is everybody gets the same link. People all check in at the same time usually, and I let them in one at a time to the waiting room, which nobody else is in. It's just you in the waiting room. I'll usually say hi and catch up, and then I will put you into one of the virtual conference rooms I've created for each of the participants in the case. And then I do that, I check everybody in. Some of the cases can take time. That 25-person case, 23-person case took a little while to get everybody checked in and made sure that I put them in the correct room, because that's one of the two things that I can do wrong on my end, is end up putting somebody in the wrong room. And then I basically go back and forth between conference rooms that I've created during the process of the mediation, kind of like getting up and walking into different conference rooms here in the offices. The only difference is I get 0 steps in and my finger gets all the work out. The beauty of the breakout room method is I can pull you out of a conference room where you are and bring you into your own separate conference room with me, with opposing counsel, with anybody else that we need to, and I can move people back and forth. That's been very useful to me. I don't do it in every mediation for sure, but the opportunity to move people around where they need to be, or bring people together who aren't in the same room, is a beauty of Zoom. It would sort of be like the old days of bringing you into a separate conference room here and talking to you, or maybe bringing you and opposing counsel together in a conference room to talk. I can do it virtually. You don't have to move. I just teleport you in and out. So that's how I do the mediation now. The only downside of that is if there are a lot of participants in the beginning, it does take me a few minutes to get everybody checked in, situated, and put in the right room. How's the other way I can screw that process up? Well, there's a little red button down at the bottom of my screen that says close all rooms. And if I accidentally hit that red button, it will bring everybody back into the waiting room at once, where in certain cases that would be a disaster. It's easily remedied by me clicking the open all rooms button immediately after I say close all rooms, and everybody returns to their same locations, and there might be a split second if they're watching that they would see it happen, but otherwise I stay away from that red button. Talking to me outside the mediation, as I said, I can pull you into a conference room. I also like using the cell phone, particularly if you don't want it to be obvious that you're talking to me. So I will text people in the beginning of the mediation, exchange cell phone numbers, and then sometimes there's a point where people want to chat with me and I just say, hey, I'm ready to come back to your room. Do you want to chat about it now? Talk on the telephone if we need to. Then we go back into the virtual conference room. We can do it by me pulling you out of the room and bringing you back into the room. So it's very easy to have that kind of interaction. Screen sharing, one of the beauties of this Zoom is that, let's say in the old days, I was in with you and you said, hey, that's not what the plaintiff said. Here's his depo, or here's her depo testimony. And I'd carry that into the other room and I'd read page and line number. Well, with the share screen, you can share the screen with me. You can email me the document and I can share the screen with them, much like I'm doing here with this PowerPoint presentation. That's one of the things I learned by trial and error. It's a great process. And it allows me complete control. The only thing you need to be aware of is when you show share screen, make sure that there's nothing else up on your desktop that you don't want people to see when you do that. I have had situations where people have their whole computer up and showing on the share screen, and I tell them, you might want to close that until you find the email that has the document. But this is a great thing. If you haven't used it, use it. You can annotate things. If you are the one who is sharing the screen, you can move your cursor around so people can see where your cursor is. You can box things, you can bold things, you can add animation to it. So it's a really useful tool. And I've used it quite extensively in mediations, even Google Earth. If you're dealing with an accident and you want to look at the location and what the views were of the various people on the street from the corner, it's a great process. If you haven't tried it, definitely want to try it. And then, you know, for me, in the old days, people would stick their head out of the conference room door and say, hey, Richard, we're ready for you. And I'd come back down the hallway. What I usually do is when I leave the room, I say, okay, I'm going to leave. And when you're ready, text me and I'll come back. And so that's an easy way to let me know, hey, Richard, it's time to come back. Or, hey, Richard, before you come back, can we chat for a second? Lastly, and I'm looking at the time here, so we got a couple of minutes to go. Lastly, of course, is the settlement process. This really is important because you spent a half a day or a full day, you've reached a settlement. In the old days, sometimes you'd have a release with you. I'd walk it down to the plaintiff's room, I'd hand it to them, they'd look at it, they'd say, okay, or they'd say, no, we need to change this. And the plaintiff or plaintiffs would sign the release that day and everybody walks out with a settlement. Can't do that when it's all virtual. So that's one of the things that I do cover with folks in advance, particularly on the plaintiff side. Where are you going to be? Where's your client going to be? And if we get this case settled, how are we going to memorialize it? Some cases, the lawyers feel comfortable walking out of there without anything signed. And if you folks are all comfortable, I'm comfortable. Most of the time, somebody wants something done. So I can prepare a short form settlement memo on my Adjudicate West portal here. I can put it into a DocuSign document and I can send it out to everybody to DocuSign. I have a way to track to see who's looked at it, who signed it. And when it's finalized, everybody gets a fully executed copy of the settlement agreement. If there's a full release, I've had you folks email that to the plaintiff's lawyer who will then email it to their client or print it out if their client's with them and share it there with them. And I've done cases where there's just been a simple email confirmation, usually by one of the lawyers, that's outside the mediation confidentiality to make sure it's admissible and enforceable. But these are things that you definitely want to think about because getting something signed that day, there have been cases where the plaintiff would sign it, but they have no printer where they are. They haven't even had email, but I can send it to a cell phone if they have an email account. But these are definitely things that you want because you want to make sure that if you've settled the case, you've got the deal done. Obviously, certain cases require more time, and Documentation is created after the fact, but most of the time, people like to have it done the day they're there. So that's sort of an overview. I'm very fortunate to be able to do it virtually. I'm anxious to find out from you folks what questions you have. I really want to know what you liked about Zoom mediations and what you don't like about it. Are there things that we can do on our end to make it better for you or your clients? But really the question is, what does the future hold, right? What are in-person mediations going to look like? I think we have done away with the plastic screens that we had up. I think if the state of California lifts their mask mandate June 15th, I'm hoping that we will do the same. Obviously, if people are more comfortable wearing a mask when they move around in the common areas, that's fine. My preference is not to do an in-person mediation if everybody's going to be masked up in the conference room. I'd rather see people on the computer screen than not see them sitting here with a mask on. When are we going to do that? Well, I think it's coming. I've already had people asking to schedule in person. I think I have some scheduled in June already. And I think as we move further and further past this pandemic and the vaccination rates increase, I think more and more people will want to do in person. And then really the question is this ever going to go completely away? I think the answer is no. I think there's going to be a certain percentage of people that are just going to want to keep doing it this way. There are going to be people who are anxious to get back in person, and then there's going to be blends. There's going to be people who, well, there's going to be mediations where some people are here and some people are not here. We need to know about that in advance and figure it out. I have like a little studio set up here in a conference room, so it's not conducive to people coming in and sitting with me with their client on my computer screen and then leaving and me getting the other party on the computer screen. So those things would need to be worked out, but I think there's going to be a hybrid process. We will be back in person and we are going to have people on the computer screen, and that's just the way it's going to be, which is fine with me. But I am looking forward to seeing everybody back, not just in mediation, but just in the community at our events and around town. Very excited to start getting back to the human interaction that I so desperately miss. So that's my my little 30-minute presentation. I appreciate you listening to me. I do hope we'll be able to shake hands one day soon, in the beginning and at the end. Until then, what I'd like to do is open it up for questions. David, I know you've been monitoring this. I see question. Have you done mixed Zoom in-person mediations? No, not yet. Actually, that's not true. Yes, but the in-person folks were in a conference room and did not interact with me. They just needed the facility to be there with their client, but I actually didn't go between their room and the virtual room, which does present an interesting question for me. How comfortable would you be if some people are live with me and you're on a computer screen? Would it make you feel uncomfortable? Is it not the same playing field? Do you recommend attending such a mediation in person if possible? I look at David, I think if you're comfortable coming in person, I'm comfortable. I'm fully vaccinated, I'm street legal, I'm ready to go. And if you folks are comfortable to come in person, I'm comfortable to do it in person. And if my client refuses to attend in person, how can I mitigate the negative effects? Yeah, hey, I didn't even know that question was coming, but I alluded to that. So there's no negative. I mean, I don't judge people for not coming in. Obviously, that's all I've been doing for 14 months is looking at people on a computer screen. So if somebody feels more comfortable being at home, being somewhere other than here, by all means, they got to be comfortable. I don't want them here feeling nervous and, oh my God, he just walked in the room. Is he bringing some diseases in? I want them to feel 100% comfortable. And if they'd rather be virtual, that's fine with me. We would just need to figure out if that's going to happen. And so I walk into the conference room with you, but your client is virtual. Are you going to have a computer with them on your screen? Am I going to be able to see them when I talk to you? Are we going to project them up on one of the TVs in the conference room that we have here? So those are the technical issues that we would need to work out. But from my standpoint, there's no negative inference. It's not like, oh, that person's not here, so therefore that means something. It doesn't matter to me at all. I want people to feel 1,000% comfortable. And David, hopefully that answered your question. All right.
Yeah,
so David,
Richard, if you don't mind, I'll jump in. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, please.
Yeah, so let me just tell everyone, we've got a few questions coming in. That's great. I'll go ahead and moderate those. I'll pose those to Richard and he can answer. But we also have the ability to have you come up on the screen and ask a question yourself, and that's what we would prefer, honestly. Even if you're wearing sweatpants or no pants like Ben Kramer, we'll go ahead and we just above from the chest up. All you need to do for that, click the raise hand button at the bottom of your screen. We'll be able to see who wants to raise their hand, and then we'll turn on your video for just that moment. And then we can turn it back off when your questions or after Richard has answered your question. And so we're already getting some come through. I did want to ask you though, I did want to point out, Richard, that Ben Kramer thinks that the plant behind your left shoulder is fake. Is that the fake plant?
Do you think this is fake and that's
Yeah, that's
real?
what he thinks. Yeah.
Okay. Well, we'll let other people weigh in before I give away the answer.
All right. But Ben also has another question. How many Zoom mediations have you done without pants on? Any there? 0.
Thanks, Ben. The answer is 0. For about the first week, because if you'll remember when this whole thing started, right, and we went into this lockdown, the question was, well, how long are we going to be in this lockdown? I mean, is it going to be like a couple months, maybe 3 months, top 6 months, really at the worst case scenario, right? How long is it going to last? So I'm in my home. I'm in a spare bedroom. Do I really want to put my suit and tie on? No, I really don't. So I wore a nice sport coat, a shirt with no tie. That lasted for about a week. Then I reached out to some of my colleagues and they were all wearing suits full time. And I said, all right, I'll wear a suit. Do I need to wear the bottom of my suit? Well, yeah, because if somebody like Ben Kramer says, hey, Richard, you're not really wearing your pants, are you? I'd say, yeah, Ben, I got my pants on, I got my shoes on, I got my belt on. Yeah, I'm fully dressed. So I actually had a mediation coming up with somebody that I knew was going to ask me that question. And in fact, he did. So I've done 0. Have I seen mediations with people who are not wearing full suits? Yes, I have. Do I care? No, I don't.
Well, thank you. And as more questions come in, I had a question for you, Richard. I'm just curious if there's have you noticed a trend? Are mediations more successful in this virtual era? Are they less successful? Or would you say mediations their cases are settling at the same rate? Do you have any idea about that?
I have a great idea about that because I did a seminar last year, I think in the fall, and I actually went back and looked at my statistics from 2019 compared to 2020. How many cases settled at the first session? How many cases settled after? How many cases remained unsettled? And what I found was the percentages were like identical. And I kind of expected there to be less cases settling percentage-wise the first time than before, but the numbers were actually identical. I think it was like 0.1% difference. The cases that didn't settle in the first mediation were the same. The difference was the percentage of cases that hadn't settled and how long it took to get them settled. Obviously, with no trial date looming for a long, long period of time, there were a few more cases that were out there lingering around that were going to go to trial that hadn't resolved yet, only because they hadn't been able to go to trial. So that percentage was like a 10-point difference. But otherwise, I haven't found any significant difference. The cases that aren't going to settle don't settle, and the cases that are going to settle do. And people are so used to this format now, I don't think it makes any difference to them. And obviously with the world reopening more and more, and with trials actually starting to happen now, I think the percentages are going to increase of those cases that don't settle the first time, that require follow-up. More of those cases will be settling because there is an end in sight.
Great. Another question, have you ever run into any issues where a party or any member of a party refuses to turn on their camera, and so you can only either talk to them via not video, but conference call, and how does that affect the mediation?
Yeah, so I don't think I've had a case where they refused to turn their camera on. There have been some where they couldn't figure out how to get their camera to work. I have found some in-house insurance companies did not allow their adjusters to be on camera for, I think it was a technological reason. They just didn't have the bandwidth that it required to run cameras at the same time as all their other infrastructure. Is it awkward to look at a black box and know that they can see me, but I can't see them? Yeah, I mean, it's weird. I'd rather see their face than not, but does it negatively influence the mediation at all? No, it's like being on the phone. My first week, so my last mediations were on March 17th, St. Patrick's Day, back to back. I had back-to-back mediations the next day. And I remember Mark saying to me, hey, Richard, we're closing the offices down. And I said, well, what am I doing about tomorrow's mediation? We're setting them up by phone. And so I did them by phone. In fact, I think one of the participants here today was my second remote mediation ever that I did by telephone. And then the following Wednesday, I had back-to-back Zoom mediations, and I did Zoom ever since then. But I haven't had a situation where somebody said, no, I'm not going to turn my camera on. No.
Here's a question from Ben Kramer. Since most plaintiffs do not have experience with mediations as opposed to our defense clients, have you done anything different via Zoom to establish a rapport with them?
That's a very good question, because obviously rapport with everybody is important. And from my standpoint, having been a plaintiff's lawyer, I know how anxious and nervous most plaintiffs are when they come into a mediation. I haven't done anything differently other than make them feel very comfortable when they have technological issues, which a lot of them do. Made it easy for them. I give them my cell phone. Hey, I can't hear you. Call my cell phone, and I write the number out. And I've actually walked some plaintiffs through the process of getting their computers up and running. And then other than that, I'm pretty much the same as I would be in person, except I'm looking at them over a camera instead of being across the table from them. But it's the same process. If they're angry, I let them yell. If they're sad, I let them cry. So I haven't done anything differently. I just want to make sure they feel comfortable in this virtual world. And I think some people probably feel better not being face-to-face and doing it over a computer screen instead. So hopefully that answers your question.
Here's a comment from our president, Vanessa Worrell. She says it's more of a comment than a question, but I have something that I could go off of it. Something that she really loves about Zoom mediation is not having to travel there and back, which you addressed a little bit. A mediation no longer cuts into full days anymore, so I'm able to be more productive all around. And insurance adjusters really like that too. My question off of that is, do you find that because it's less of a commitment sometimes for insurance adjusters to fly out or for clients to fly out and be there, are they still as equally bought into trying to get that case resolved and settled that day as they would have been otherwise?
Well, that's hard for me to judge because I don't know what they're thinking. They usually don't tell me what they're thinking. Do I think there's an impact for them not investing the time and money to come out? There could be. I mean, there could be, honestly. What's the difference? I've had adjusters mediating multiple cases at the same time. So they're mediating my case, they're doing another case, maybe they're doing a couple cases. Do I think that leads to a potential for less buy-in? Maybe. Is it widespread? No. Have I settled huge cases? Yes. Have I not been able to settle small cases? Yes. Is it because they're not here? I don't think that's the reason. I think there are other reasons for it. I can't really pinpoint a case where I thought, oh, the reason this didn't settle was because the adjuster was here. There's usually reasons on one side or the other or both for them not to settle that are understandable. So I haven't seen any like great trend of, forget it, they're not going to move, I'm going, goodbye. No. Which is a legitimate concern to have, particularly for me as a mediator, because let's face it, if the plaintiff's bar thinks these are all a waste of time because the adjusters are just going to check out, they're not going to show up either. Which, go back to what I said about the percentages settling. There was zero difference between 2019 and 2020.
Perfect. Yeah, thank you.
I hope that answered your question, Madam President.
Yeah.
Somebody's got to do the raise hand and come on here. Come on. Anyway, go ahead, David.
Yeah. Another question was, do you, as you know, in your personal mediation, do you ever have all the entire group or however many parties, are they ever all on screen at the same time at the beginning before you break them out into rooms? Do you see any value in that?
I have yet to do a joint session. I have yet to do a joint session. I had one case where one party asked and the other party said no. I have not had an occasion to have everybody on the same screen. No. Is there a benefit to it? I think in the right case, there might be if everybody really wants to do it, but I don't want to do something at the beginning that is going to set us back right out of the gate because somebody gets upset at something somebody says, or they take too aggressive of a position, or they really get a little aggressive. You know, my job is to take the aggression and the war and the fighting out of the process just for my day. We don't settle it. You can go back, strap on the war gear and fight all you want to. But for today, let's at least figure out if we can get the thing settled. So put aside the animosity, put aside the difficulties that you've had dealing with opposing counsel. Yeah. Now I forgot the question. What was the question?
Oh, just if you have everyone ever in the same, same screen all at once. Yeah.
No. And again, I can do that with the nuclear option of clicking the close all rooms button, and then everybody will come pouring back in here. But I've been assured by my IT people that all I have to do is immediately click the open all rooms button. And unless they're all sitting there looking at the screen, they won't even realize what happened. They'll be right back where they started.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Does anybody else have any questions they'd like to pose to Richard here? We have a very, very great resource. And like he said, I think that this is probably going to be a reality that we're going to deal with for a long time, even when we do have the ability to do them in person. Here's one from Nicholas Schechter. It says, in some mediations, I noticed that mediators introduce the parties to one another so they can associate a face with a name. Do you find value in that? Is that still useful in Zoom settings?
Well, it's something that can easily be done technologically. As I said before, I can move people anywhere I want to and put them anywhere I want to. Just trying to think here. I mean, there have been mediations in the past, particularly pre-lit mediations, where the adjuster would like to meet the party. And now that I'm thinking about it, actually, there have been a couple where I've brought the lawyer and the client in with the adjuster. Usually it's just an adjuster on a pre-lit file, and give them the opportunity to talk and interact and ask questions and whatnot. The more information everybody has, I think the better chances are that the case is going to settle. And if there are questions about somebody that aren't answered, then that case probably won't settle. So if it's going to be beneficial to the process, absolutely let people meet. But I'd say the vast majority of my mediations are deep into the litigation, and people have seen each other enough already, and it's a benefit that they don't have to see each other face to face. So, but I'll do whatever is necessary to help the process. I'm all about the process. There is a process to complete a mediation from beginning to end. And anything I can do to facilitate that process working, I'm happy to do, including bringing everybody together in one setting if they need to. I have had a case where I had multiple defense lawyers, and I did bring everybody into one room at the beginning to figure out if we were going to be doing this thing all as one and one for all, or whether there was going to be a divide and conquer. That was very beneficial. And then I left the room and let them all talk about what they wanted to talk about, and then came back. But typically people are in separate rooms and they don't see each other. And I think a lot of people would prefer it that way.
Here's a question from Ian Friedman. One thing about Judicate is you will often have productive conversations with opposing lawyers just by bumping into them in the snack area. How do you simulate that virtually, or can you simulate that virtually?
Well, you can't simulate the accidental bumping into because you both are out of the room. No, that cannot be accidentally simulated unless I, of course, hit the close all rooms button, and then you will be out there in the lobby together, which is a reason to come back in person, Ian. It's absolute great reason to come back in person. Now, can I make that happen? Can you say to me, hey, Richard, I'd really like to talk to so-and-so. I think it might be beneficial for us. Yes, but it's not organic. It's, okay, hold on, let me teleport you all into the same room. I'll be right behind you. And then it's staged, not staged, but you know, it's set up. It's not, oh, hey, what's going on? And then, yeah, you say, hey, come on, is there some way we can get this case settled? What's going on? Is your client the issue? What's going on? Those are beautiful conversations. And those will start happening when we come back here in person. By the way, to the new and improved Judicate West offices, in case you haven't already heard, there's been a lot of construction going on here since I don't remember now, beginning of this year, end of last year. So we have expanded up to the 25th floor as well as the 24th floor. I don't remember how many conference rooms, Mark. I think you said 30 conference rooms total. They have redone everything here, all new carpeting, painting, new conference room tables, expanded some areas. Our lobby and where our receptionists sit is under massive construction because we're building an internal stairwell between 24 and 25. We're moving our kitchen area where you would run into people upstairs to 25. But we're only a couple months away from this being finished. And then you'll have the opportunity to go upstairs to the snacks and oh, there's your opposing counsel. Hey, what's going on? It's coming. I can feel it. I'm excited.
Do we have any other questions for Richard?
Nobody's going to raise their hand and show themselves on camera. That's very disappointing. I could just, I'll just do this then. No, I'm kidding. One person, Ben Kramer, come on. Even if you're in your golf shirt at the country club. Wait, do we have the ability for me to just drag somebody in here if they don't want to, kicking and screaming?
I don't think we have that. They have to allow, unfortunately.
Darn it. All right. Well, any other questions I can answer for you? Anything? Anybody want to share with me what they dislike the most about Zoom mediations, even in the chat feature? Because I would like to know, from your aspect. I mean, I don't know how many you've done. You obviously haven't done as many as I've done, but is there something about the process that you really don't like that hasn't been shared with us already? And is there something that we can do or I can do to make that process better for you or your client that we're not doing? Because I'm happy to do, again, whatever it takes to make the process successful and functional. I just don't know what it's been like from your side. I only know what it's been like from my side, sitting in the same chair, looking at this computer day in and day out. Even though I get to see friendly faces of the folks, I'd rather say, hey, anybody? Bueller? Bueller? No?
Looks like it's pretty quiet.
That's okay. That's fine. You know what? 5 minutes early is 5 minutes early. I'm sure everybody's got stuff to do.
Right. Well, Richard, we really appreciate you being here today. And we're very grateful to have you. I think this has been a very informative and obviously very timely presentation because, like you said, I think it's very likely these are going to continue at least in some form, or probably in a mixed in-person and half virtual form in the future. So we appreciate you being here today and look forward to seeing you again in the future.
Thank you very much. It was nice to see everybody's name scroll on the side here when you all checked in. I look forward to seeing you back in person, and if not in person, on my virtual screen. Have a great weekend, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.